The Apple Watch Series 10 is here. It has the biggest display ever. It's also the thinnest Apple Watch ever, making it even more comfortable on your wrist, whether you're running, swimming, or sleeping. And it's the fastest charging Apple Watch, getting you 8 hours of charge in just 15 minutes. The Apple Watch Series 10, available for the first time in glossy jet black aluminum. Compared to previous generations, iPhone XS or later required. Charge time and actual results will vary.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women's Football Podcast in partnership with Her Game Too. I'm Charlotte Richardson, and a belated Happy New Year to you all. It's brilliant to be back with our first podcast of 2025. And what a lineup we have to kickstart the new year. Firstly, I would like to welcome back onto the pod, Dan Pentland. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Hi, Charlotte. Good, thanks. Hope you're okay.
I'm very, very well, thanks. Were you out watching any games this weekend, Dan? Did any of them survive the frost and the cold temperatures that have beleaguered the country over the last week?
I bottled it. I'll be honest, I bottled it. I usually get out every week, but I bottled it. I thought, you know what? It's just too hit and miss. And obviously, Saturday, there were a lot of men's games off. So, yeah, I bottled it this weekend, but hopefully back next weekend.
And Dan, I don't blame you because a lot of the games were available to watch on YouTube as well. So staying in, keeping cozy and warm, but still getting your hit of Women's FA Cup action sounds very sensible and very wise. And for those of you that have tuned into the pod before, you know about my South East London roots and my affiliation to Charlton Athletics. So I am delighted to say that we have Katie Bradley with us today. And Katie, we know all about how your weekend was spent, kickstarting the year with a trip to Chelsea in the FA Women's Cup. We'll go into more detail about it later, but how good was it after the Christmas break to be playing? And Kingsmeadow is not a bad way to start off a new year.
Yeah, it was good. You watch so much football over Christmas as well, so I feel like you're always itching to just get back playing. So yeah, all the girls were happy to be back on the pitch yesterday.
It's one of the things I like about the women's football schedule, though, is that you do get that winter break. Did you have a good one? Were you able to go back home, enjoy the festivities and have a bit of a rest and recoup as well?
Yeah, it's nice to just mentally switch off and just be with family for a little bit. But I think as soon as Christmas was done, I was ready to get back then.
Well, we've certainly been ready to get back and to talk all things women's football. And as I mentioned, the Adobe FA Cup took centre stage this weekend. The fourth round threw up some intriguing ties. Unfortunately, due to that bad weather that we alluded to, a lot of games were called off. The matches at Brighton, Everton, Leicester, Crystal Palace and Arsenal all fell foul to the frost. One game took place on Saturday. Manchester United hosted National League North side West Brom. Mark Skinner's side eventually won comfortably 7-0, including a hat-trick for super sub Rachel Williams, a brace for Celine Bazet, and a goal for Melvin Mallard and the returning Ella Toone. Dan, West Brom can take a lot of heart from the performance, less so from the scoreline. That's often sometimes the harshest bit about this competition. The scoreline doesn't always tell the story. It was 1-0 until the 77th minute. And then I suppose tiredness and everything that you expect kicked in a little bit. What did you take away from that matchup?
I thought, yeah, you've got to give credit to West Brom. I think, you know, when you're in the third tier and, you know, they're probably punching above their weight a little bit when you look at some of the clubs in the third tier. There's some huge clubs with huge backing and, you know, West Brom might get there, but, you know, they're probably not at the point of a Burnley or a Forest at the minute. So to go to a Manchester United side is an absolutely huge ask, to be honest. I thought they'd lose heavily, but, you know, to keep it a 1-0, as you say, for so long is some feat, really. You know, the gap is huge. You know, even in the National League between top and bottom of tables because of the investment at one end of the table and, you know, maybe other clubs taking a cautious approach. It's such a gulf, you know, and when you're talking about two leagues difference, I'm guessing there's probably about 30, 40 places between West Brom and Man United. It's absolutely massive. So to go there, backs to the wall, 1-0, and then yeah, you're right, they did get tired, and United did what they'll have been hoping to do in the end. But yeah, you've got to give them credit, and I think going back to their league for the rest of the season, they're going to take an awful lot from that. And as players, particularly the younger players, I think they're obviously going to take that experience, and it'll help them going forward.
Absolutely. And Katie, I know that you have roots with Manchester United. They played a part in your development very early on in your career. I think it's really important to know Ella Toone getting on the score sheet, and quite fitting, really. Her first goal since scoring that absolute worldie at Wembley when Man United won the FA Cup. She's had such a tough time off of the pitch. That's well documented. I think sometimes we forget that elite footballers are also human beings as well. And that goal will have done her confidence the world of good. Do you think that she can really push on with the Euros coming up in the summer? She's such an influential player for both club and country, isn't she?
Yeah, she is a top player. And I feel like as a person as well, obviously I knew her when I was at United. I think she's such a grounded person, and she's really not changed from when she was really young in the academy as well. But yeah, she is a top player, and I feel like she can be one of England's best players in the future.
I think the likes of Ella Toone, Leah Williamson, Alessia Russo almost spring to mind because of the impact of England winning the Euros, the increased exposure, the spotlight. Players like Ella Toone probably have even more weight on their shoulders, a level of scrutiny that perhaps we haven't seen in the women's game. We see it a lot in the men's game, but she seems to have a really core group of people around her, and her mentality probably as strong as her technical ability. Was that the sense you got even when, she was a youngster and playing with her?
Yeah, I feel like now, just because the quality is just getting even better from further down now, like when everyone's moving up, I feel like more groups are moving up together, and you're seeing them right through from the young ages in academy to senior football, and like the ages that some people are breaking through into first team now is obviously just getting younger every time because the quality is just getting so good.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's easy to forget as well just how young Ella Toone is. You look at her as one of the most experienced players, not just for Manchester United, but even for the England Lionesses to a certain degree. And because she's had that time on the sidelines, I imagine she feels like almost like a new signing in January for Manchester United. So great result for them. They will now focus their attentions on WSL action coming up. There was another matchup between WSL and National League. It saw second place in the National League South, Ipswich Town, travel to the Joy Stadium to take on Manchester City. And again, another really credible result. They lost 3-0 to a City side who made lots of changes. Jill Ward, Laura Coombs, and another player coming back strong with a goal as well, Viviane Miedema. Dan, again, despite the result, Ipswich will take a lot of heart from that result, particularly when you look at the fact that back in 2020, they played Manchester City, which wasn't so long ago, and they lost that game 10-0. Huge improvements from their perspective, and for Manchester City as well. Viv Miedema coming back. How crucial could she potentially be for their aspirations, not only in the WSL, but to win this competition? Because I can imagine it's one that's high on their priority list.
Yeah, I mean, focusing on City first, I think they've got to have all of their players available. I think we saw going into Christmas, they kind of limped into it just because they didn't have the numbers there. Obviously, Viv was out. I think Bunny had a few fitness issues at the time, Lauren Hemp. These are key players. I think if you're going to win anything and be competitive throughout the season, you need to have all of your best players fit all of the time. You need to be lucky with injuries. If anything turns, then that makes it extra difficult. So having Viv back is absolutely huge. I mean, to be fair, City's team, although it was changed, there was a lot of good players playing yesterday. It wasn't as if it was like one of the League Cup games where a team will go to City and find it difficult, and Gareth will then put on some of the younger players. It was even the bench had real strength on it. So, for Ipswich, they can take even more credit from the fact that they played against a pretty solid, strong City side. I mean, if you look at Ipswich, I don't think we probably talk about them enough. They've obviously got great backing from the men's club. That the men going into the Premier League has probably helped. You look at some of the names of the players in their squad. They obviously signed Lucy Watson on loan, which is a massive signing for National League at the end of last week. Grace Garrett, Natalia Negri, we know from the Championship. I think Ella Rutherford is another player. I think they've got Angela Addison went there at some point as well. So, on paper, for a National League squad, that is a pretty strong team, to be honest. I think, you add a few pieces to that, and if you go into the Championship, you're probably quite competitive. So I think they'll be happy. I think if they measure where they are and where they want to be, and how they performed yesterday, I think they'll be pretty chuffed with how that worked out. And again, they'll take so much confidence from that. And when they're thinking about this transfer window and adding the next pieces in the next one, they're in a good place. I think if they can just get out of that National League, the will's at the feet.
Yeah, completely agree. And Katie, I don't know what your sense is on how the WSL title race might unfold this season, but it always tends to be that it comes to the final game of the season. More often or not, it's Chelsea, Manchester City. For City, do you think that they will really be eyeing up the FA Cup as an opportunity to get some silverware this season?
I think for the top teams in the WSL, you want to just get your hands on as many trophies as you possibly can. But I think it's similar in the Championship with just how tight it is at the top of the table. Anything can happen, literally. In our league, there's 5, I think we're 8th, and there's 5 points from us on top. So you look at 8th and you think, we're far down the table, but there's really nothing in it, and people are dropping points, and it's the same in the WSL. So it will probably go into the last few weeks and the last games. Anything can happen.
I definitely think for Gareth Taylor, eyeing up a potential trip to Wembley is a testament to perhaps why he went so strong for that game against Ipswich. And again, the context of we've had a winter break, needing to get players up to speed as quickly as possible with the opening weekend of the WSL coming up quickly. Katie, Charlton were handed the toughest of tough draws, a trip to Chelsea, champions of England, on an incredible unbeaten run. 4-0 was the scoreline. I watched the highlights back, and it was everything I expected in terms of a Karen Hill side. You guys looked so organised behind the ball and out of possession. You had a few chances too. What was the feeling like in the dressing room when that full-time whistle went?
I think we were honestly really proud of ourselves, just with how we carried ourselves. We made sure that we weren't going to go there and get bullied, and I think we took account of that, and we held ourselves really well. We took a fight to them, and we made it not easy for them. We just tried to not concede early. I think that was one of our main goals, and then we could kind of grow into the game. And I think we got to 40 minutes without conceding. And then the first goal was rough. Obviously, it was a bit of a deflection, and then the penalty was very questionable. But
softest penalty, Katie. I have to say it. It was so that is the only penalty that gets awarded to a team like Chelsea.
I know, and I think if that was us, I don't think we would have got that. But it's part of the game, and Ramirez is such a strong player. She's an absolute beast, and obviously to get brought down like that, it's rough to take. But there was so many positives to take, and I think the team are in a really good place mentally, and we're just really eager to get going with the league now and show what we can really do.
Yeah, and I'm always really reticent to sort of pose questions like this because I don't want it to sound patronising at all, because you went there with every aspiration to get a really good result at Chelsea, but I still want to ask, were there any players that you were really hoping that you'd get the opportunity to go head to head with? Because again, it's not like you're on there feeling overawed by the superstars. You're there to battle. But I just wondered on a personal note, were there any that you thought, I'd really like to go toe to toe with her?
It's hard because I feel like all of them are world-class players. So I think at first when the draw happened and when you see the lineup, etc., you get a bit of that shock moment, but then you just flip that straight away into you've got a job to do, and it's good to just see how you can compare with players like that, world-class players. So, it was really good. And like I said, there's so many positives for us to take, both in possession and out of possession. We were really organised, and mentally it is so hard against teams like that are constantly moving the ball. And we knew that we weren't going to have much of the ball, and we're fast in counter-attacks, and we created a lot of chances, I think a lot more than we thought we would, especially in the first quarter of the game. I think we could have probably made better decisions in the final third. But I think with just like the status of like the team that you're playing against, there is that just extra little pressure where and composure can dip and stuff. But yeah, I think if we play like that against Durham and take that into the rest of the season, I don't think we have much to worry about. I think we'll do really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see some of those traps that led to some really nice moves. I think Kaylee Green had a chance as well, didn't she? Like on the outskirts,
Yeah.
had just been placed differently. You never know. Those are the moments that can change games. But certainly, the girls put on a fantastic shift. Did you swap shirts with anyone afterwards?
We didn't. No, I think there's a bit of a not wanting to be fangirl mentality. But yeah, obviously, like it is great playing against players like that. But no, there was no swapping of shirts.
Understood. And Dan, I think it was really, really interesting to see how Chelsea would sort of set up after their winter break. They have carried this fantastic unbeaten run under manager Sonia Bonpastor. Every sort of challenge she's been given, the Chelsea manager, she has seamlessly dealt with. She's got the challenge now of, well, who are you going to pick? Because she's got Sam Kerr coming back from injury. You saw Neve Charles getting on the score sheet yesterday. Quite a scary prospect coming up against Chelsea, isn't it, right now?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you look at the team she fielded yesterday, and yeah, it's like it's an A team. You can't, whatever team she puts out was an A team. You can't, whoever she rests. It's tricky. Every player they've got is a world-class player, but they've probably got one backup in each position, two backups in some places. Obviously, forwards now she's going to have so many options. How's she going to kind of keep them happy? I think they've just got to stay in all four competitions right to the very end if they can, and obviously that'll allow her to rotate a squad, maximise the use of it, keep all the players happy. But yeah, it's absolutely frightening. Obviously, they've shown very, very little weakness. The transition's been seamless. There's been, no ghost of Emma Hayes or anything like that. It's just gone such a simple transition. So yeah, I mean, obviously Leicester got the point before Christmas. Nobody saw that coming, but it's down to, I suppose, the challenge is there for the other clubs now who take them on to try and kind of upset the apple cart.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see who they get in the draw as well, if they come up against another WSL side or another championship side like Charlton, who will push them all the way. Elsewhere, some other really interesting ties. A South London derby at Craven Cottage saw London City Lionesses run out comfortable winners, thanks in part to a sublime first half hat-trick from Chantel Boy-Halorka. Sunderland's Eleanor Dale will be up for Player of the Round, you would feel. 4 goals for her, as well as a hat-trick for Ellen Jones, as the Black Cats comfortably brushed aside an in-form Exeter City. And he's a friend of the podcast. Congratulations to Lee Birch's Rugby Borough. They won 6-0 up against his old side, London Bees. Meanwhile, Jasmine McQuaid's goal for Newcastle helped them see off Nottingham Forest. And Amy Hughes and Beth Merrick's goals for Wolves saw them away against Cheltenham. Gabby Nunes scored a hat-trick as Aston Villa thumped Bristol Rovers 9-0, as the free division gap certainly showed in that game. Katie, just wanted your thoughts really on any sort of results or ties that caught your eye when you were scrolling after your match.
I think, obviously I have friends for other teams and stuff, and it was hard to see the fixtures for like some lower league teams. Then you look at our fixture and it was like, felt like we was unfairly done. But yeah, I think obviously Ipswich did really well. I thought that was going to be a much higher score. But no, I think everyone else was pretty much. I think the Newcastle game, that one was closer, I think, than I thought it would have been. But no, I think the rest were pretty as I thought they would be.
Dan, how about yourself? Because I love these sort of earlier rounds of the competition. It provides a really good opportunity to see where some lower league clubs are at the chance to take on WSL super powerhouses. But on that balance, seeing really heavy scorelines can sometimes feel a bit disappointing. But any games that you'd like to put a bit of a spotlight on?
I mean, the one person who stood out to me was Eleanor Dale, who you've just mentioned. She's obviously, I think she's been in a college career in the US. She's obviously been in and around the Northeast game quite a while, and she got a little chance with Everton last season, and it didn't quite work out. She got a few minutes under her belt, and she left the club and ended up at Sunderland. And, I think when it doesn't work out at the top level, it's then kind of a challenge to make sure that, when that next opportunity comes, it kind of sticks and you make the most of it. And, I think her going to Sunderland, I think she's on 10 goals now for the season. And, she's probably excelled maybe what they were hoping for in her first season at Sunderland. So to get 4 goals yesterday was fantastic for her. And yeah, she's probably one of the, not surprise signings, but one of the signings where, they're probably, as a player, she's provided maybe more than what they expected in this stage of the season. So yeah, I think she definitely stands out. Obviously, it's a hell of a trip, Sunderland going down to Exeter as well in the FA Cup. So well done to them winning that game. Newcastle Forest was an interesting one because obviously Newcastle have spent the money. They're in the Championship. They're obviously looking towards Super League, and Forest are kind of on the coattails, kind of similar journey themselves. They're playing obviously at the City Ground as well, all their home games this year. So yeah, it was kind of a team that are kind of one step ahead, taking that kind of next generation team. So that was interesting. And obviously Fulham, London City, Fulham. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong here, but I think they're the lowest ranked side left in. I think London and the regional leagues. So yeah, 5-0 on paper, given how big the gap is and given what London City have got in their squad these days, is not a bad scoreline for them.
Yeah, I'm so glad you made the point about Fulham, because playing at Craven Cottage, perhaps one of my favourite Premier League grounds anyway, a brilliant occasion for them. It was a match that got good media exposure as well, and London City Lionesses again showed their quality. Chantel Boy-Halorka's first half hat-trick was incredible. But for football clubs like Fulham that have that ambition, whose journey is going to be longer and they're going to have to be more patient coming up the pyramid, it's what this competition is all about, providing those ties where, okay, again, put the scoreline to one side, but they're still able to showcase what they're about and where they want to be with their women's setup. So that was really good to see, and best of luck to Fulham for the rest of the season. So of the ties that couldn't take place at the weekend, we've got a few that will be catching up midweek. So on Tuesday, it's Crystal Palace versus Sheffield United. Then on Wednesday, Blackburn are taking on Portsmouth, and Leicester City will face Stoke City. The draw for the next round will take place this evening. We record on a Monday, and you can watch it on the Adobe Women's FA Cup YouTube channel from 6:30 p.m. There's sort of sounds and smells you have when you work in the game. Like it could be, the smells of the onions by the burger van, or an FA Cup we can see in like the tinfoil. It's the sound of when the balls go into the ball and you think, oh, what could happen here? Anything could happen here. And I'm sure we're going to see again some very, very interesting ties thrown up in the Adobe Women's FA Cup next round. There was also domestic duties taking place. We had a couple of games in the National League South. Hashtag went top with a 2-0 victory over Plymouth Argyle. Sammy Rowland and Honor Norton with the goals, whilst Wimbledon leapfrogged Oxford United into fourth. They secured a really important 1-0 win away at the Yellows, thanks to a first half goal from Ashley Hinks. Dan, already in the podcast, we've spoken about clubs with ambition, clubs who are investing, clubs doing things their own way to climb the football pyramid. Hashtag are an example of that. They're a real threat. Ipswich behind them, they do have games in hand. It's that funny psychology, isn't it? Of like, would you rather have the points on the board? But Hashtag are a club to keep a very firm eye on.
Yeah, I mean, the North and the South are just, there's so many teams kind of chasing the dream now. And, I was going to mention it about obviously Charlton yesterday going to Chelsea. It kind of, it flies the flag for more than one up. When you've got, as we've said, 8 teams separated by 5 points, and we've got a 12-team Super League that, probably needs a bit more life in the bottom of the table in terms of, some new faces in there that, at some point something's got to give, something's got to change. You've got to kind of take the plunge and let that happen. It's the same in the National League. Obviously, we have got the 2 up, 2 down now, which gets rid of that horrible North-South playoff that was, ridiculous, really. But yeah, again, when you've got teams like Hashtag, Ipswich, I mean, Exeter have had a phenomenal year since they were promoted. Wimbledon, as you mentioned there, they're obviously investing, and then you've got the likes of Watford, who've had success in getting to the Championship as well. It's the same in the North with Forest and Burnley. Somebody's going to miss out. So yeah, I think, Hashtag, I mean, I don't know an awful lot about the club, but obviously they're not backed by, mega millions or anything like that. So, to do what they've done, I think they beat Newcastle in the cup final last year, didn't they, as well, which was absolutely phenomenal. So, yeah, they just keep punching above their weight. But, there's other clubs in that league as well. But yeah, I think at what point does somebody need to get back around the table and say, look, we need to look at the pyramid and, how can we make it more competitive? How can we make the clubs who are kind of, fighting for the opportunity get that chance? Because at the minute, there's too many for me that will miss out. And as it's the same in the Southern this year. Is it going to be Ipswich? Is it going to be hashtag? But, somebody who wants to be in the big time isn't going to get the opportunity.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think of it from the club's perspective when the investment is going in to support the women's teams. Katie, I'd love to get your perspective as a player. You mentioned it, how tight and congested the championship table currently is. For you and your teammates at Charlton, some of them would have been at the club last season when I think it might have even been goal difference. It was certainly either a point or goal difference.
1 point, I think it was.
1 point.
Yeah.
It must be hard and arguably maybe even a bit demotivating because there's not even a playoff structure. What would you like to see if you could speak to the powers that be? What changes do you think could help?
And it's hard because I feel like every year it's getting like teams that are coming up and even teams that are staying in the championship are getting better and better. So it's not just like there's 3 teams every year that always finish top 3. It's always different. I think playoffs do make it exciting. I'm a Bolton fan and we're constantly in the playoffs. Never managed to get over the line. I think that would be exciting, but then at the same time, it's if the quality can run throughout the playoffs. I think now it's getting to that stage where it could.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is. I think for the National League, for 2 to go up, 2 to go down is fair enough. I don't think you need a playoff there, but I think because going into the WSL is such a big thing, I think the playoffs would be a good idea, and I think it would make it more exciting because when you do lose out on a point like that, it's like it is a tough one to take. But I think it's definitely made everyone even more motivated to actually get it over the line.
Yeah.
I think it was obviously a blow for them at the start. Obviously, I wasn't there. But everyone was definitely eager and hungry to get it over the line this year.
I think Katie makes some really good points there, Dan. And we've seen the sort of the management, the new WPPL, I think they're still called that. They're waiting for their official new name, but taking charge of the top 2 tiers of the pyramid. So they have the control and authority to make some changes. I obviously look at the men's game and Katie makes a good point there about Bolton and playoffs and that hunger and excitement and the memories it can create. And also looking outside of football, we've got the NFL wildcard weekend at the moment. Like I always look to America and the NWSL is a great example. They just know how to create a product and make it exciting and elongate it for as long as possible, because perhaps there's opportunity, not just for the playoff side of it, but the relegation side to just do something a bit different with the women's game. We more often than not just look to replicate what the men's do, Dan. Do you think there's potential to really innovate, and particularly looking across the pond at the NWSL, things that we could replicate to build that playoff structure and to make the season as entertaining as possible?
Yeah, I think we do need to look at something. I think I understand from the Super League point of view that nobody wants to be offering an extra place in the league at the kind of detriment of somebody who's already in there. I understand, probably the bottom half of the table being against that. But, I mean, one thought I've always had, I kind of agreed with Katie there with the playoff point. But, if you had a championship playoff winner, could they then play the 11th team in the Super League?
I love that
and
idea.
a one-off to and then it's in their hands. They've got the decision. If they, if they play well, they stay in the league. If they don't, they go down, and nobody can complain about that. So, that's one thought I've always had. But yeah, I mean, you can look at it. You could do, a top, winner goes straight up, and you could do like a top, I don't know, a 9th to 11th in the Super League and a 2nd to 4th, in the Championship, doing a mini league or something like that. But there has to be an answer. I don't think we can keep kind of kicking the can and saying that, it's 1 up, 1 down, because, the league's not getting any bigger. The excitement at the bottom isn't particularly by the end of the season, it's probably going to whittle itself out, and there's going to be one team who's possibly adrift, maybe. But And yeah, when you've got 8 teams who are all investing, all chasing the dream, you can't just be leaving the door open for one. It's just
My
at some point you've got to bite the bullet and say, look, we've got to change it. It's gone on for too long.
my fear as well, particularly with a WSL lens on, is that you don't want the seasons to get stale. And for a number of campaigns now, the championship title deciding games are great, and that often goes down to the wire. But in terms of relegation, more often or not, it's pretty clear who's going to be going down relatively early on. And then sort of below point of the table, you notice the teams like not investing in those players anymore. And like, I don't think that's fair on the players either, when perhaps, a certain team knows that, okay, we're safe this year, we can almost take our foot off the gas. Yeah. So that idea of there being a bit of jeopardy of maybe having a playoff race. I remember doing some research for this was a men's game, but for Charlton, and finding out like decades ago, they used to have like playoff relegations, which was just like the most bizarre idea to me. But imagine that, all that nerve and anxiety you might feel like watching Bolton to try and get into the playoffs. But imagine that being relegation, like, oh, the drama of it all. Talking of drama, January transfer window always sees some rumours swirling around. Sometimes there are some surprise deals going on. Katie, I know you wouldn't tell us about anything going on at Charlton, but is this a good time of the season for perhaps younger players in the WSL to go out on loan to some championship clubs? Again, I know Charlton benefited from that in the past. I've had some really good loanees. Do you expect perhaps some business to be done not only at Charlton but amongst championship clubs that could really impact and well, certainly when you're looking at that promotion chase, have a really big say?
I think, for like, the younger players that aren't getting the minutes that they want in the WSL to drop down and get minutes. And I think that's good for like the championship teams, because they don't need to warm themselves up and get experience. Like, they've already got that, so they can be thrown right in there. But I think our team, definitely, we've had a lot of injuries, and quite long-term injuries as well. So I think we are quite a thin squad, but I think we are hanging on, and we're pushing through. We don't have a lot of depth in terms of like rotation and stuff, but I think what we have now is really good. I think we probably could benefit from maybe like one in each unit, just to create a little bit more numbers in the team to be able to obviously do stuff in training. So if you're doing like 11v11, for example, you'd have to use like mannequins in some areas and things like that. So I think we benefit from that, and we bring a lot of the academy players up from Charlton as well, so that's good for them to get the experience. But yeah, I think we've had some people training. We've got one on loan that's been signed off, and then maybe there'll be some more, but I don't know. That's Karen's job to decide. But yeah, we definitely could benefit from a couple new players.
My observation when watching Charlton over the years is that Karen builds a really close-knit squad, and places is always good when you want to be pushing. You've got to sort of play how you train and so on. So to increase that intensity, I'm sure Karen and many managers in the championship will be working hard to use that contact book that they might have to get some WSL loanees. On that note, in terms of rumours, Freya Godfrey was on loan at Charlton last year from Arsenal, had a great season. Dan, I'm hearing rumours that she might be going out on loan to London City Lionesses. Tell me, what are you hearing in the rumour mill?
Yeah, I've heard that one too. Obviously, they've got Taya Godfrey there, Goldie there as well. Sorry, Taya Goldie there. So, that relationship's obviously probably already sparked up a little bit. I think obviously Everton recruiting, they had the takeover. Brian's not done yet. So, I think that squad was obviously not on its knees, but it was very threadbare through lack of investment, really, obviously, from the former owners. So I think he's brought 4 in so far. Probably at least a couple more. Nice to see them send the young girls out as well. Macy Settle went out last week. A couple of girls to Sheffield United. I think Izzy Hobson's going to be a great player, but obviously she's not getting that opportunity week in, week out at Everton. So to be able to now be in a position where he's getting senior players in to send the youngsters out is really, really good. I think obviously Leicester are thin on the ground in terms of a striker, so I'd expect they might try and sort their season out by kind of resolving that issue. Be interesting to see what Palace do as well, because obviously, they've been in that league now for, for 3 or 4 months. They've kind of got a feel after 10 games, what it's like, what they need more. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
They lost Brooke Aspin as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they've had
I was
really
really
unlucky
impressed with
with
her.
long-term injuries with low knees. Yeah, I think they had a couple of Chelsea players, didn't they? And I think they both had severe injuries, so that was unlucky, really. And then the Championship, I think, again, the takeover at Sheffield United, we know they were threadbare, so are they going to be able to add further bodies to what they've already brought in? I know they lost a couple last week as well. And it's going to be interesting with the top 8, because what do you do? Do you stick or do you twist? It's so competitive up there. If you bring in 3 or 4 players, it might boost you 100%, or it might knock you, and those players, you try to bed them in and they don't have the desired impact. So, it's going to be interesting for the 8 clubs just to see how they kind of wheel and deal, what they feel they need to be better than the other 7 teams. And yeah, it'd be fascinating with that. I don't know if, being a club in that position, what would you do? I don't know.
No, you've summed it up perfectly there, Dan. I find January such an interesting time of year anyway, because the fixtures come in so quickly. There's such heavy demands on squads, but I think it's the time of year where managers really earn their crust in terms of the experience they have to know exactly what their squad needs, whether it is, like Katie was alluding to, sometimes it's getting a few bodies in the building to add competition, perhaps for the likes of the ones you've mentioned there, Leicester City. I think London City Lionesses, if they can add some more goals to their team, that changes the complexion of their season. But when you've got a happy camp, it's really important what personalities you bring into a group as well. So it's not all about getting results on a Sunday afternoon. It's sometimes how's that environment in the working week as well. It's going to tee up to be such a fantastic sort of second half of the season. And I really, really cannot wait. And on the note of the second half of the season, of course, this weekend, we get back to business with the WSL and the Championship. And I think the standout game for everyone is the Manchester Derby at the Etihad. And although she's a Bolton girl, Katie, of course, your roots, you know both clubs incredibly well. Give me your take on how this game could potentially unfold at the weekend.
I think my money goes on City, but I think when it comes to a derby, it doesn't just end up being which team on paper is better. I think a derby ends up bringing a lot of things out in the game, and the wheels could come off for one team, and yeah, so anything could happen, honestly. But I think my money goes on City to get the 3 points.
And the likes of having Miedemar back on the score sheet as well. Missing Alex Greenwood, was so gutted when she went down with that injury. She's a huge loss to them, but they seem to have a number of leaders across the squad there to hopefully cover in her absence. And we'll see her back on the pitch soon, I hope.
Yeah, she was definitely a big loss, but I think it's good timing with players that they've got getting fit now. So I don't think it will be too detrimental to the squad.
No, I'm just having a look here at all of the fixtures. So on Saturday, we have a 5:30 p.m. kickoff, Everton taking on Aston Villa. On Sunday, the Spurs 12:30 kickoff against Leicester. Arsenal host Crystal Palace. We have a London derby there, and a London derby between West Ham and Chelsea. That is a 3 p.m. kickoff. And then the Manchester derby. I always like the late game on a Sunday. I always feel like it wraps up the weekend really nicely. Manchester City versus Man United. Dan, WSL games this weekend, do you see most of them sort of being routine scorelines? Are you expecting potentially any upsets? I think the one I've got my eye on is Leicester travelling to Spurs. I'm sure Leicester fans, after that incredible draw against Chelsea, didn't really want that winter break. It's a real morale-boosting result for them.
Yeah, I mean, they do keep it tight to Leicester. They obviously really, really struggle with scoring goals, and that's the problem. And obviously they're coming up against a Spurs side that like to attack. Sometimes they struggle with the balance between attack and defence a little bit. So yeah, if they keep it as tight as what they have been keeping it, and they can manage to get a resolution at the other end, they could sneak the game. But I mean, I'd fancy Tottenham, to be honest, in the current form and what they've got available. I just think Tottenham, 1 to 11 have probably got a better team at the minute, and it's more settled. So yeah, I think Leicester just need to go and play their game and play it properly to still be in with a chance of winning that game. The Manchester derby for me is an interesting one because Mark Skinner gets it in the neck every week, and love him or hate him, and I know some people have, various opinions of him, but, they've conceded 3 goals this season in 10 games, and, they're a point behind City. So, yeah, absolutely my money's on City to win the game. But, if United do what they do well, then, there's no reason why they can't go there and stay in the game and hopefully try and sneak one for them. But, yeah, I think for me, City will win that game. But, don't rule out United, because I think they have had a good season so far.
Yeah, the bragging rights are just so important in that derby, and it's great that it's being held at the Etihad as well. Important just to remind people as well that we've got some Friday night action in the WSL as well. Liverpool will host Brighton. That is a 7 p.m. kickoff. In the Championship, Katie, your Charlton side down to 8th, but as you said at the very start of the pod, just 5 points off of top. Give me your assessment on the first half of the season for the Addicts.
I think we started off really strong, and then I think we just went into a little bit more of a rough patch where I think we lost a bit of how we were playing and our style of play, and we were switching a lot of things around each week. And then I think the last 3 or 4 games before Christmas, we really found ourselves again. And I think the team now are in a really good place to kick on. And there's literally 5 points. That's nothing, and everyone's dropping points at the top of the table. And I think the Birmingham game that we had right before Christmas, I think we should have got 3 points from that game. So that one was a tough one to take, because then we would have been, 2 points off top of the table. But like I said, 5 points is really not a big gap.
It's always our Championship cliche, but really any team can beat any team in the division. So you look ahead to that match against Durham. It's a long old trip, but win that, and I think you're just 1 point off of them. So it's almost a 6-pointer in a way to be able to travel there and hopefully come back with a win.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of pressure to get the 3 points at this game, and it is tough going to Durham. They are a good side, and they do make it difficult. And their place to play at as well isn't easy. But yeah, we really do need to get the 3 points, I think, in this game to then kick on and keep the momentum then.
I always go to my phone to refresh the league table, and I genuinely think from now until the end of the season, every week we could well see a different team at the top of the table. That's just the way it is with goal difference and points. And elsewhere this weekend, it's second versus third. Bristol City hosted London City Lionesses, which, Dan, feels like another opportunity, perhaps for a bit of a statement win for either of those teams. I honestly couldn't call it. In terms of other matches going on in the Championship, Dan, are there any that you're going to be keeping a really close eye on?
Yeah, I think bottom line is I can't take my eyes off it every week. It's that good. But I think Bristol City, to be fair, have kind of got it together, I think, going into Christmas. I think obviously Stephen Kirby went in there and, I think he sorted out what needed to be sorted out, and they look like genuine title contenders now. So, maybe after a little bit of a slower start, I feel like they're probably the form team going into Christmas. So, playing host to London City is going to be an interesting game. I think obviously these kind of close games that every single week is going to be thrown up is going to be absolutely key. You don't want to give anybody else an inch. And, coming to the Northeast, I feel like titles can be kind of won and lost in the Northeast. Newcastle, Durham, Sunderland, they're all kind of different tests. The pitches are all different. If you're up in Sunderland in January, is the game going to be on? Is it going to be off? That sort of thing. Obviously, 4G at Durham comes in for a little bit of criticism sometimes.
Yeah.
Newcastle's a tough place to go, and same at the other end of the country. Your Southamptons, Bristols. I think the away games and doing well in those, if you can pick up points away from home, whilst obviously making your home a fortress, then I think you're in a good place to kind of challenge for that title.
Yeah, consistency is absolutely the driving force in terms of getting out of the Championship into the WSL, and it's going to be intriguing as well. Who keeps their composure, the discipline, and of course, sometimes it is about keeping fit and healthy squads together, as Katie was saying. Trying to have that competition in teams is so helpful. In other news from the past week, I think the main headline has been Jonas Eidevall, who left Arsenal in October, of course, has been named as the new manager at San Diego Wave. He replaces Casey Stoney, who was sacked in June. And the irony is not lost on me that Jonas Eidevall has managed to secure a new job, all whilst we wait to find out who is going to be Arsenal's new manager. Perhaps by the end of January, Arsenal might have, it seems to be the most long drawn out recruitment process going on at Arsenal. I'm not sure whether I respect it in terms of it's been thorough, or whether I find it a bit insulting to Rennie Slagers, who's done incredibly well. I think she's done more than enough to warrant the job full time. Where are you at in your perspective?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think Rennie should get the job without a doubt. I think, when she's unbeaten, what is it, 11 games now? Obviously, she's turned them around massively, and they probably won't win the title, but they've got momentum now, and they could win something this season. So yeah, I don't know whether Arsenal are taking the approach that they don't want to kind of rush into it while everything's kind of rosy at the minute, or are they looking for somebody external? Are they going to give Renee the job? I don't know. It's kind of it could be anything. I don't really know what their thinking is, but I mean, for me, if you go 11 games unbeaten, Champions League, Super League is not easy to do. She's proved she can handle the job. She's popular with the players. She's probably kind of improved kind of the harmony between the club and the fan base and the team. So, why would you want to change that? For me, even if you give her a 1-year deal or an 18-month deal, I'd be jumping on board to get her as head coach.
I completely agree. I think she's almost victim to the fact that she, and I say this with inverted commas, isn't a big name. I think there was a lot of rumours about whether Casey Stoney would go back. Nick Cushing was linked. It's been a strange sort of period, but like you were saying, Dan, because of the fantastic maturity that and leadership, I think she's shown in taking that interim role, she's helped make it a really smooth couple of months for Arsenal, and at a time when they really needed that. And I cannot wait. Next weekend, I'm covering the match against Chelsea, and I would like to think by that point perhaps she is their permanent manager. I really think she deserves it, but we will see how all of these really interesting appointments turn out, and January is certainly a month where there is plenty to talk about. And Katie, Dan, it has been a pleasure to kickstart the new year with you both. Thank you so much for your time, Dan. I'm sure we'll have you back on the pod again very soon. And Katie, best of luck for the match against Durham. I will be doing my very best to get down to the Valley soon to watch you girls in action. But yeah, all the best to you. And don't forget to subscribe via all good podcasting platforms and give us a follow on social media so you can stay up to date. We are at the handle TWFP1 on X and Blue Sky, and do follow us on the socials, because there's lots of exciting events coming up. And later on today we are going to be at the WSL Hall of Fame event, so do make sure that you give us a follow. And on Instagram as well, it's the Women's Football Podcast, and of course on TikTok as well at the.women's.foot BA2. There we go. Hopefully you've written that down. Good to be back with you all. Happy New Year, everyone. And we will be back again next week. Have a great weekend and enjoy your football.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.